German reports described the early advance as unstoppable. Town after town fell in days, and commanders believed the campaign would be over before winter. The blitzkrieg seemed to work once again, but small delays began to appear on the margins. Roads softened, fuel convoys lagged behind, and every unexpected halt came at a cost. The race against the time was already slipping away. At first, Soviet forces retreated quickly, leaving behind empty trenches and burned positions. German troops believed the enemy was collapsing, but evidence on the ground told a different story. Ammunition casings, fresh footprints, and improvised defenses showed a fighting force regrouping, not breaking. Momentum was shifting long before anyone realized it. As the Germans pushed deeper, the landscape itself turned against them. Roads were blown apart, forests were blocked with fallen trees, and Soviet patrols struck from unexpected angles. Every mile demanded more fuel, more repairs, more time. What once looked like a swift march now felt like an endurance fight the German army wasn't built for. By late autumn, the Soviet retreat hardened into structured resistance. Small units delayed German movements with precise attacks. Rail hubs were destroyed before capture, forcing German troops to stretch their supply lines even farther. Maps showed progress, but reality showed exhaustion. The campaign had begun to outrun itself. Temperatures dropped fast, engines faltered, weapons jammed, and clothing meant for a short summer war failed under the cold. Meanwhile, Soviet defenses grew stronger. German commanders noted the first signs of stalled momentum. The blitzkrieg, designed for speed, had entered a season built to stop it. Reports from the front described a growing silence, no longer strategic retreats, but reorganized Soviet units preparing for counterattacks. German divisions, dispersed and undersupplied, struggled to coordinate. Snow deepened, masking movement and hiding dangers. The winter was no longer a backdrop. It had become an active force reshaping the battlefield. Weapons froze in place. Vehicles refused to start. Even basic movements became difficult as ice gripped every piece of gear. German units realized the enemy wasn't the only threat. Nature itself was wearing them down. Soviet forces operated with increasing confidence, using the climate to their advantage. Supply shortages intensified, fuel convoys lagged, food ran low, and ammunition shipments couldn't keep up. Soviet strikes targeted these weaknesses, attacking isolated units and transport routes. The front, once pushing forward, was now held together by improvisation and endurance. The Soviets adapted quickly, using skis, sleds, and winter camouflage to move with surprising speed. German troops struggled to react. Frozen weapons and stalled trucks left entire positions exposed. What began as scattered skirmishes turned into a pattern, one that signaled a larger shift coming. Local counterattacks intensified. Soviet forces hit weak points, pulled back, then struck again. German soldiers faced an enemy who knew the terrain and the weather intimately. Lines began to bend under pressure. And before we continue deeper into this turning point, make sure you're following the full story. This chapter changes everything we thought we knew about the Eastern Front. Temperatures reached levels that stunned even seasoned officers. Oil froze solid, tank tracks shattered, and boots cracked from the cold. Every failure slowed the retreat, creating openings for Soviet forces to push harder. The German army was now fighting two wars, one against the Red Army and one against the Winter. Soviet troops gained momentum. Their mobility in deep snow allowed rapid strikes on exposed flanks. German defenses, built in haste, couldn't withstand coordinated assaults. Reports described growing gaps between units. The front line was dissolving faster than command could react. The cold crippled equipment across the battlefield. Engines cracked, machine guns froze open, and lubricants turned to gel. German troops relied on makeshift fixes, but the scale of failure was overwhelming. Soviet forces faced challenges too, but their winter gear and experience gave them the edge. Roads disappeared under fresh snow, turning movement into a slow, grinding effort. Every step became a test of strength. Soviet artillery, now positioned with increasing accuracy, struck key routes. German soldiers understood the danger. Mobility was slipping away, and with it, any chance of regaining control. Soviet fortifications thickened. Log walls, trenches, and frozen barricades appeared across the front. Meanwhile, German units struggled just to keep weapons operational. The balance of power shifted as preparation met exhaustion. Against all odds, the Soviets began reclaiming the initiative. Night raids increased. Soviet ski patrols moved silently across frozen ground, striking isolated posts before fading back into the dark. German units, spread thin and low on supplies, found themselves reacting instead of controlling the field. Momentum was already changing hands. Reports of destroyed trucks, missing patrols, and sudden attacks multiplied. Winter camouflage helped Soviet units move freely behind German lines. Meanwhile, stalled engines and frozen weapons trapped German troops in place. The front was collapsing one position at a time. Soviet forces escalated their operations, combining infantry, skiers, and machine gun teams in coordinated attacks. German mobility declined sharply. Units lost weapons to ice, vehicles to freezing metal, and time to the worsening weather. The tide was turning, mile by frozen mile. German defenses weakened. Field shelters collapsed under snow, radios failed, and vehicles froze solid. Soviet troops advanced using deep snow tactics unfamiliar to their enemy. The front that once surged forward was now shrinking, retreating, breaking. Survival replaced strategy. Counterattacks intensified across the line. What started as scattered engagements became coordinated offensives. German forces abandoned tanks and supply trucks as cold-destroyed engines. Soviet troops pressed every weakness. The Blitzkrieg had ended. In its place stood a grinding winter war. Extreme cold crippled soldiers and equipment alike. Ammunition froze, fuel thickened, and uniforms offered little protection. Meanwhile, Soviet mobility improved with each passing day. German positions failed faster than they could be reinforced. The offensive was effectively over. Soviet troops advanced with growing strength, striking vulnerable sectors and isolating German units. Vehicles froze beyond repair and supply lines collapsed. Retreat was no longer a tactic. It was the only option left to avoid encirclement. The momentum of the entire campaign reversed. Heavy weapons fire intensified. Mortars, machine guns, and infantry assaults pushed German forces back step by step. Exhaustion and freezing temperatures eroded morale. Multiple positions were lost in a matter of hours. The front was breaking open, and nothing could stop it. Soviet breakthroughs widened. German units lost contact with command as communication systems froze. The retreat became disorderly, and abandoned equipment marked every mile. The Red Army was no longer reacting. It was dictating the pace of the war. Encirclement tightened. Soviet forces sealed off escape routes while German troops fought to break free. Engines stalled, weapons jammed, and soldiers struggled through waist-deep snow. The German advance that once seemed unstoppable was now collapsing under its own weight. The German offensive ended in the deep freeze of the Russian winter. Mechanical failures, shattered supply lines, and relentless Soviet counterattacks crushed any hope of victory. This was the moment the war changed direction, the day the dream of a quick triumph became the beginning of a long decline. History would remember this turning point as one of the war's defining failures.